The sun hung low over the rugged plains, casting long shadows across the dusty earth. The wind whispered through the dry grass, carrying with it the faint scent of sagebrush and the distant mountains that rose like silent guardians on the horizon. In this harsh land, survival was never easy, especially for those who traveled alone. An Apache woman ran with swift, quiet steps, her dark hair tangled with leaves and dust. Her chest heaved with exhaustion, but she did not slow. Behind her, the faint sound of hooves echoed. Settlers or soldiers, she could not tell, but danger was close. She had been running for hours, escaping a group that had attacked her small camp. Her mind raced as fast as her feet. She could not afford to stop, could not afford to be caught. As the sun dipped lower, she spotted a large tree standing alone near a rocky outcrop. Its branches stretched wide, offering shade and a momentary hiding place. She ducked behind it, pressed her back against its rough bark, and tried to catch her breath. But the wind betrayed her location, rustling the grass and carrying the sound of her presence. From behind the rocks, a figure emerged, a cowboy, tall and lean, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a worn leather vest. He carried a rope in one hand and a calm, steady look in his eyes. He was no stranger to this land, and he had learned long ago to read its signs. The woman froze, her instincts screaming danger. She had been taught to fear outsiders, especially men like him. Her hands trembled as she gripped the small knife at her belt, ready to defend herself. The cowboy stopped a few steps away, raising his hands slowly. "Easy now," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'm not here to hurt you." The woman's eyes narrowed. She had heard those words before, empty promises from men who wanted to take advantage of her. She shook her head, backing away slightly. "Stay back," she warned, her voice sharp and filled with fear. He nodded slowly, taking another step closer, careful not to scare her further. "I saw you tied to that tree over there," he said, glancing at a rope that still lay coiled nearby. "Someone else left you here. I want to help, not harm." Her eyes flicked to the rope, her body tensing. The memory of being bound, helpless, and at the mercy of strangers made her stomach turn. She did not trust him, but she also knew she could not run forever. Exhaustion was catching up, and every step left her more vulnerable. The cowboy crouched slightly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Look," he said softly, "I don't know who you are or why you're here, but I can't let you get hurt. You need water, food, and a safe place. I can give you that." The woman hesitated, her mind torn between fear and hope. Could she trust him? Every instinct screamed no, yet something in his calm demeanor suggested honesty. She weighed her options quickly: fight and risk injury or stay and risk betrayal. Before she could decide, the wind shifted, carrying the sound of approaching hooves once more. The woman's eyes widened. Whoever was chasing her was still close. Panic surged through her veins. She grabbed the rope, tying it loosely around her own wrists, more as a shield than a restraint. "I won't go with you," she said firmly. "If you try anything, I'll—" "You won't need to," the cowboy interrupted gently. "I just want to make sure you're safe. No one's coming to help you now, except me." For a long moment, silence hung between them. The plain seemed to hold its breath. The woman's heart pounded so loudly she feared he might hear it, but the cowboy only waited patiently. There was a strange honesty in his gaze, a promise of protection without force. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you help me?" He shrugged slightly. "Because it's the right thing to do. Out here, right and wrong matter more than fear. You deserve a chance to live, not just survive." She studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deception. None came. Slowly, hesitantly, she allowed him to step closer. The cowboy held out a hand, not to grab, but to guide. "I'll help you untie that rope," he said. "Then you can decide what to do next." Her hands shook as he gently loosened the knots. She kept her knife ready, every muscle tense, yet she did not move away. The rope slipped free, and for the first time in hours, she felt a small measure of relief. She rubbed her wrists, wary but alive. The cowboy offered her a canteen of water. She glanced at it, then back at him. After a moment of hesitation, she took it, drinking slowly. The cool water eased the dryness in her throat and gave her a brief moment of peace. "You're brave," he said quietly, watching her carefully. "Not many could handle what you just did." She flinched at the compliment, unused to praise from strangers. "I had no choice," she muttered. "They would have killed me." "I know," he said simply. "But you made it this far. That counts for something." The Apache woman looked at him, noticing the sincerity in his eyes. She still did not fully trust him, but for the first time she realized not everyone who carried a rope or a weapon meant harm. Some could choose honor, even in a land as harsh as this. The wind shifted again, rustling the grass, and the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The plains were quiet now, but the danger of the night loomed. She had survived the day, but the night was another challenge, and the cowboy offered her a small measure of safety in a world that often offered none. Slowly, she nodded, a silent agreement forming between them. She would stay near him for now. Not out of trust entirely, but out of necessity, and perhaps, she thought, she might learn that not all outsiders were enemies. As the shadows lengthened and the stars began to appear, the cowboy and the Apache woman sat near the tree, the silence between them filled with cautious understanding. The first step toward trust had been taken, even if fear still lingered in her heart. And in the quiet of the plains, both realized that sometimes survival was not just about running. It was about finding the right person to help you through the night. The night fell quietly over the plains, the stars twinkling like tiny fires against the deep velvet sky. The Apache woman sat near the tree, hugging her knees, still wary of the cowboy beside her. She had learned long ago that danger could appear without warning, and the world was full of people who claimed to help but only brought harm. The cowboy, sensing her unease, remained a few steps away. He did not speak, did not move too quickly, simply waited. His calm presence was strange to her. He was not like the others. No sudden gestures, no threatening words, just patience. Finally, after what felt like hours to the woman, he spoke. "You're hurt," he said softly, glancing at her scraped hands and dust-streaked face. "Let me help," she shook her head. "I don't need help." Her voice was firm but not angry. It was a shield, a way to keep control. "I'm not asking," he replied calmly. "I'm offering. A clean wound is easier to heal than an infected one." Her eyes narrowed. She did not want anyone touching her, but the truth was obvious. Her hands stung and the scratches from running through the thorny brush were deep. Slowly, she unwrapped the cloth she had tied around her wrists and allowed him to inspect the wounds. He worked carefully, cleaning the cuts with water from his canteen and covering them with fresh cloth. His movements were gentle, respectful, as if he knew that trust was earned, not demanded. The Apache woman flinched once, then stayed still. She was still unsure about him, but his actions spoke louder than words. She realized that he truly meant to help. Hours passed and the night grew colder. The wind swept across the plains, carrying the scent of sage and distant pine. The woman shivered, and the cowboy noticed immediately. Without a word, he took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. She hesitated, but finally accepted it. The warmth seeped into her, not just from the coat, but from a small sense of security she had not felt in a long time. "You can rest," he said. "I'll keep watch." The woman wanted to refuse, but exhaustion was heavier than fear. She leaned against the tree, trying to calm her racing thoughts. In the quiet, she began to observe the cowboy more closely. He was not the careless, rough man she had imagined. His eyes were steady, his movements precise. There was a respect for life in the way he handled even the simplest tasks, like checking the surrounding area for danger or adjusting the fire to keep it low and safe. She realized slowly that perhaps she had judged him too quickly. Not everyone with a rope or a gun was cruel. Some like him could choose honor even in a harsh world. The cowboy spoke again, breaking the silence. "You were running from someone, weren't you?" The woman stiffened. Her hand went to the small knife at her belt. "That's none of your business," she said, her voice sharp. He nodded, not offended. "I didn't mean to pry. I just want to understand so I can help." She studied him, trying to see if there was any hint of trickery, but found none. Slowly, she began to speak, though carefully. "I was leaving my camp," she said. "There were men. They attacked. I had to run. I did what I had to do." The cowboy listened quietly, not interrupting, not judging. He only nodded, his expression calm. "I see," he said finally. "You survived. That's good. That counts for a lot out here." The Apache woman's lips pressed together. She was not used to people speaking kindly about her actions. Survival was often met with suspicion, not praise. She looked at him with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again. "Because it's right," he replied simply. "Because I can. And because no one deserves to be left to die when it can be prevented." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. For the first time that night, she felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps she had found someone she could trust, though she would not admit it aloud. Suddenly, the distant sound of movement made her heart race. The wind carried faint whispers and the rustle of grass, signs of other people approaching. Her hand tightened around the knife. The cowboy noticed immediately. "Stay calm," he whispered. "They're not close and we have time." Her fear did not disappear, but his calmness gave her courage. She realized that trust was not about forgetting danger. It was about finding someone strong enough to help you face it. The night stretched on, and the Apache woman and the cowboy remained near the tree. The stars above seemed to watch silently, witnesses to a fragile understanding forming between two people from very different worlds. She had learned to survive alone, but now with him nearby, she saw the possibility of survival with help. By the time the first hints of dawn appeared, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the woman's exhaustion overcame her fear. She allowed herself to rest, her head leaning against the tree, while the cowboy kept watch, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. In the quiet moments before morning, the woman realized something important. Not all outsiders were enemies. Some, like the cowboy, could be allies, people who acted with courage and kindness when others chose violence and fear. She still did not fully trust him, but she was beginning to see that perhaps there was more to this world than endless threats and betrayal. And in that first light of day, as the plains glimmered under the rising sun, a silent promise was made. She would watch him, and he would watch her, and together they might just survive what the day would bring. The sun rose slowly over the plains, bathing the world in warm golden light. The air was crisp, and the wind carried the distant scent of wildflowers mixed with the dry earth. The Apache woman awoke, her body stiff from the long night, and blinked against the brightness. For a moment she felt a strange comfort. She was alive, and the cowboy beside her was still there, watching, patient, calm. She moved carefully, testing her strength and the soreness in her arms and legs. The wounds on her hands had been cleaned and bandaged, but they still ached. She flexed her fingers, trying to regain full movement, and noticed the cowboy rising from his seat near the tree. He carried a small bundle of supplies, a few biscuits, some jerky, and a canteen of water. "You should eat," he said, placing the bundle near her. "You need strength for the day ahead." She hesitated, wary. "Why do you care?" "Because surviving isn't just about running," he said gently. "You need food, water, and sometimes someone to watch your back." Her eyes narrowed, not with suspicion this time, but with a careful curiosity. She knew he was right. She had been running alone for days, trusting no one, and the loneliness had begun to weigh on her. Slowly, she reached for the food, her fingers brushing against the package. They ate in silence, the sound of birds and the rustling grass filling the space between them. Each bite reminded her of the world outside her fears, the world she had been avoiding for so long. The cowboy watched her, making sure she ate enough, but he did not press her to speak. Respect, she realized, was something he understood well. After breakfast, he looked around the plains. "We should move," he said. "You can't stay here?" "It's too open, too easy for someone to find you." She stood slowly, the weight of her exhaustion clear in every movement. "Where will we go?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. "Not far," he replied. "There's a small canyon a few miles from here. Shelter, water, and cover. You can rest and we can figure out what to do next." The Apache woman studied him. She did not fully trust him yet, but the logic made sense. Alone, she would be easy to track. With him, at least, she had a chance. As they walked together, the plains stretched endlessly around them. Every sound made her heart race, the snapping of a twig, the sudden cry of a bird. But the cowboy remained calm, his presence like an anchor in the chaos. Halfway to the canyon, a rustling in the grass stopped them. The woman tensed, her hand going to her knife, ready to defend herself. The cowboy held up a hand, signaling her to wait. From the tall grass emerged a wild horse, its coat shiny and strong, eyes wide with curiosity. The Apache woman exhaled sharply, relief washing over her. "It's just a horse," she muttered, lowering her knife. The cowboy smiled faintly. "Not everything that moves wants to harm you," he said. "Sometimes the land itself is just alive." They reached the canyon by midday, a small oasis tucked between rocky walls. A stream trickled through the center and wildflowers dotted the edges. It was a hidden haven, away from prying eyes and wandering danger. The cowboy helped her find a safe spot, gathering wood for a small fire and clearing a place where they could rest. As they sat by the stream, the woman finally allowed herself to speak more openly. I thought you might harm me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've seen too many people pretend to help only to bring pain." He nodded slowly. "I know," he said. "Trust is earned, not given. And I don't expect you to believe me yet. I just hope you see that my actions are honest." She studied him, noticing the steadiness in his eyes, the way he never forced her to do anything she didn't want. Slowly, a small sense of trust began to form. "Why do you care about me?" she asked. "Because no one deserves to be left alone and in danger," he replied simply. "Because someone helped me once when I was in trouble. I'm just returning the favor to the world." The Apache woman was silent for a moment, thinking about her life, the people she had lost, and the fear that had followed her for so long. She realized that perhaps this man was different. Perhaps he could be trusted, even if only a little. The day passed slowly. They cleaned their small camp, gathered firewood, and the woman taught the cowboy a few simple ways to move quietly through the brush. In return, he showed her how to find edible plants, how to track animals, and how to stay safe from the dangers of the plains. Their skills complemented each other, and for the first time in days, the woman felt a small sense of security. As evening approached, the canyon walls cast long shadows, and the temperature began to drop. The Apache woman shivered, and the cowboy handed her his coat again. She accepted it without protest, the warmth comforting more than just her body. "Tomorrow," he said, "we can move further. There's a village nearby that might be friendly. You can decide if you want to go there or keep moving on your own." She nodded, the thought of returning to people both frightening and hopeful. She had been alone for so long, learning to survive, trusting no one. But now, with him by her side, she realized that survival could mean more than just hiding. It could mean finding allies, learning to trust again, and discovering that some people truly wanted to help. As night fell, they settled near the fire. The Apache woman lay on a bed of soft leaves, the cowboy sitting nearby, keeping watch. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax, if only slightly. She was still cautious, still wary, but the fear that had ruled her life for so long had lessened. And in that quiet canyon, with the stars above and the wind whispering through the rocks, the first true bond began to form. Not of love, not yet, but of trust and understanding. Two people, from different worlds, learning to survive together in a land that could be cruel, but also unexpectedly kind. The Apache woman closed her eyes, letting exhaustion take her while the cowboy kept a steady vigil. Outside, the plains were alive, unpredictable, and dangerous, but for the first time, she felt that she was not entirely alone. The sun climbed slowly above the canyon walls, casting warm light over the quiet stream. The Apache woman awoke with a start, sensing a shift in the air. The cowboy had been awake for some time, scanning the horizon with steady eyes. He noticed her stirring and nodded silently, then pointed toward a distant ridge. She followed his gaze and saw movement, figures on horseback, riding quickly across the plains. Her heart skipped a beat. "They're back," she whispered, fear tightening her chest. The cowboy studied them carefully. "Not far, but we have time. We need to move carefully." The Apache woman's grip tightened on the small knife at her belt. "Why are they following me? They won't stop. They're probably looking for what they think is theirs," he said calmly. "We just need to be smarter than they are." Without another word, they packed their small camp, gathering what supplies they could carry. The cowboy moved efficiently, tying the bundle securely and keeping a hand near his gun, not in threat to her but for protection. The woman followed, still tense but increasingly aware of his steady presence. As they crested a small hill, the approaching riders came into clearer view. 4 men, rough and determined, scanning the land for any sign of the woman. The Apache woman's mind raced. They were faster and better armed, but she had the cowboy with her now. That small comfort gave her courage. "Listen," the cowboy said, crouching behind a rock. "We can't outrun them in the open, but we can use the canyon. It's narrow and they can't move as quickly there." "Follow my lead," the woman nodded, her heart pounding. She stayed close as he led her toward the mouth of the canyon, choosing the path carefully, stepping softly over stones and brush. Every sound they made seemed loud, echoing off the canyon walls, but he moved with confidence, and she learned to follow without hesitation. They entered the canyon, the walls rising high above them. The riders slowed as they approached, realizing the terrain was difficult. Dust rose from their hooves, and the Apache woman felt her fear mixing with a strange thrill. She had never experienced teamwork like this before. "Here," the cowboy whispered, pointing to a narrow side path that wound up the canyon wall. "We can move higher. They won't follow easily, and we can see everything from above." She nodded, trusting his judgment. Together they climbed the rocky incline, using handholds in the rough stone. Her muscles burned, but she pushed herself, inspired by the cowboy's calm determination. When they reached the top, they crouched behind a cluster of rocks, peering down at the canyon floor below. The riders were struggling to navigate the narrow path. One stumbled and the others shouted warnings. The Apache woman realized that the cowboy had chosen the perfect advantage point. "You were right," she whispered. "They can't follow us here." The cowboy nodded. "Sometimes it's not about fighting," he said quietly. "It's about using your mind and the land." For the next hour, they watched the riders' struggles. The Apache woman felt a new sense of respect for the cowboy. He had not just saved her physically, but had used strategy and calm thinking to protect them both. She realized that bravery was not only about guns or strength. It was about patience, intelligence, and knowing when to act. Eventually, the riders gave up, retreating back toward the plains below. The woman exhaled, a mixture of relief and amazement washing over her. She looked at the cowboy, who smiled faintly but remained vigilant. You saved me again," she said softly, her voice filled with quiet gratitude. "I didn't do it alone," he replied. "You stayed calm, followed my lead, and moved carefully. We did it together." For the first time, the Apache woman felt a sense of partnership. She had been alone for so long, but now she understood that survival could mean relying on someone else without fear of betrayal. As the sun climbed higher, they continued along the canyon, moving cautiously but steadily. The cowboy taught her more ways to navigate the terrain, how to find hidden paths, how to listen to the land, and how to recognize signs of animals or humans nearby. In turn, the Apache woman shared her knowledge of the land, pointing out edible plants and safe water sources. Each exchange strengthened their bond, built not on words alone but on mutual respect and understanding. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small clearing with a shallow stream. They paused to rest and drink. The Apache woman dipped her hands in the cool water, splashing her face to wash away sweat and dust. She felt refreshed, her mind clearer. "You've taught me a lot today," she said, looking at the cowboy. "More than I've learned alone in months." He smiled faintly. "And you've taught me too. The land is full of lessons, and sometimes the best teacher is someone willing to show you what they know." As they sat together by the stream, the sun began to dip again, casting long shadows across the canyon floor. The Apache woman felt a strange mix of exhaustion and pride. She had faced danger, relied on another person, and survived. More importantly, she had begun to understand that trust could exist even in a world that had taught her to fear. The cowboy prepared a small fire for the night. He handed her a piece of jerky and a canteen of water. She accepted without hesitation this time, feeling safe enough to eat and drink without constant fear. Night came quickly, and the canyon grew cold. The Apache woman wrapped herself in the cowboy's coat again, the warmth more comforting than any words could express. She realized that she no longer feared him, she respected him. Respect, she thought, could be stronger than fear, stronger than caution. As the stars appeared above, she watched him keep vigil, scanning the darkness with steady eyes. She had survived because of his help, his guidance, and his calm courage, and in the quiet canyon, a deep understanding formed between them. Survival was not just about avoiding danger, but about learning to trust the right person when it mattered most. For the first time in a long time, the Apache woman felt a flicker of hope. She was not alone, and she had an ally she could rely on. Outside, the canyon was quiet, filled only with the whisper of wind through rocks and the distant calls of night birds. Inside, a bond of trust was growing, delicate, cautious but unbreakable, and as they sat together by the fire, both realized that the real strength of survival was not in running or hiding, but in facing danger together side by side. The next morning, the canyon was bathed in soft golden light, and the cool breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and earth. The Apache woman awoke slowly, stretching her stiff muscles. For the first time in many days, she felt a sense of calm. The cowboy was already awake, tending to the small fire they had left smoldering from the night. His movements were quiet, careful, and respectful. as if he understood that she needed peace as much as food and water. She watched him for a moment, noticing the way his eyes scanned the horizon without tension, the ease with which he moved. She had grown used to his presence, and more than that, she had begun to trust it. Trust was a strange and delicate thing, she realized, especially after so many betrayals and dangers. Yet here it was, growing slowly like a small flame in the darkness. "Are you ready to move?" he asked gently, noticing her awake. She nodded. "Yes," she said. "I think I can follow you today." They packed their few supplies and began walking along the canyon floor. The Apache woman stayed close, not out of fear, but because she knew he had guided her safely through danger before. Her steps were careful, her eyes scanning the landscape, but she also paid attention to the cowboy's movements, learning from his awareness and patience. As they walked, they came across signs of the land's other inhabitants, tracks of animals, broken branches, and hidden streams. The cowboy pointed out how to interpret each sign, and the Apache woman listened attentively, adding her own knowledge of plants and survival skills. They moved as a team, each learning from the other, each growing stronger and more confident in their ability to navigate the wilderness together. By mid-morning, they reached a shallow river that cut through the plains. The water was clear and cool, and the Apache woman knelt to drink, feeling the refreshing liquid wash away the last traces of fatigue. The cowboy joined her, crouching on the opposite bank, and for a few quiet minutes neither spoke. The sound of the flowing river and the distant calls of birds filled the space between them. "You've changed," the cowboy said finally, breaking the silence. "You're stronger than before, braver than before, and wiser too." She looked at him, a small smile forming. "I had to be," she said softly. "Out here you don't get a choice," he nodded. "True, but not everyone survives it alone. You've survived, and that's something to be proud of." The Apache woman's thoughts drifted to her family, her people, and the long journey that had brought her here. She realized that the cowboy had done more than protect her. He had shown her that not all outsiders were enemies, that trust could exist, and that courage sometimes came in quiet, steady forms rather than loud displays. They continued walking until the river widened into a calm, shallow lake, surrounded by trees. The location seemed peaceful, hidden from the world, a place where they could rest without fear of being discovered. The cowboy set down their packs and began arranging a small fire, while the Apache woman explored the edge of the water, skipping stones and watching the ripples expand across the surface. "You've taught me a lot," she said, turning to him, "not just about survival, but about people too. About trust," he smiled faintly. "And you've taught me something too. Courage isn't just about fighting. It's about surviving, enduring, and knowing when to rely on someone else. You've shown me that." For a long moment, they simply sat together watching the sunlight shimmer on the water. There was no need for words. The quiet understanding between them spoke louder than anything could. The Apache woman realized that she no longer feared the cowboy. She respected him, and more than that, she valued the bond they had formed. As evening approached, the sky painted itself in hues of orange and pink, and the temperature began to drop. The cowboy handed her a coat again, and she accepted it without hesitation. She felt the warmth, not just from the fabric, but from the safety and care he provided. Night fell slowly over the lake, and they sat together by the fire, sharing a small meal and stories of their pasts. Though carefully chosen and free of unnecessary pain, the Apache woman spoke of the land she had known, the survival skills she had learned from her people, and the hardships she had faced alone. The cowboy shared his experiences in the plains, teaching and learning in equal measure. By the time the moon rose high in the sky, they were both silent, each lost in thought. The Apache woman looked at him and realized something profound. She had survived not only because of her own skill and courage, but because of his guidance and respect. He had never forced her to do anything she didn't want, never threatened her, and never judged her. He had simply helped her survive, and in doing so had earned her trust. "You've saved me more than once," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," he replied gently. "Surviving is thanks enough, and seeing you safe, that's reward enough for me." The Apache woman nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She realized that in a world filled with danger, cruelty, and fear, kindness and honor were rare treasures, and she had found one in this cowboy. a man who acted not out of desire for power or reward, but out of simple decency and courage. As the fire burned low, they prepared to rest for the night. The Apache woman lay down on a soft bed of leaves, the cowboy keeping watch as always. She felt a sense of peace she had not known in months. She was no longer alone, no longer entirely vulnerable. She had learned to trust, to rely on someone else without fear of betrayal. And in the quiet of the night, with the stars twinkling above and the wind whispering through the trees, the Apache woman made a silent promise to herself. She would carry the lessons she had learned, the courage, the trust, and the understanding of honor, into whatever came next. And she would remember the cowboy who had shown her that survival was not just about avoiding danger, but about facing it together, with respect and humanity. By morning, she would decide her next step. But for now, she was safe, she was alive, and she had discovered a truth more valuable than any treasure, that in a world full of fear, there were still people who could be trusted, who could show courage without cruelty, and who could help another human being simply because it was right. And as the fire crackled softly and the stars faded with the approaching dawn, the Apache woman closed her eyes, grateful for the life she still had, and for the man who had taught her that even in the harshest of lands, kindness and trust could exist.